When you close the welcome screen, you're left with the interface of Adobe After Effects. Now, this interface may be a little bit daunting at first if you've never looked at this before, but it's kind of straightforward to understand. All these areas are called panels. So we have the project panel, we have the composition panel, we have the info panel, we have the timeline here which says none because we don't have anything at the moment inside of our timeline. We have the effects and presets panel, and so on. Let's start with the project panel. The project panel is where you'll be bringing the material into, and inside of this area you can organize them, so you can rename them, you can delete them, you can duplicate them, you can put them in folders. That's all done inside of the project panel. To the right hand side is your composition panel. A composition is what you'll eventually be exporting from After Effects in most of the cases. So you see a visual representation of what's going on inside of your project. At the moment it appears grey because we don't have a composition to work with, but later on you'll see that we actually will be bringing some material into the project panel. Then we'll put those materials from the project panel into our composition panel to see what they look like and to do all our tricks and effects in After Effects. To the right here is your info panel. This area will be really useful. It tells you information about color, transparency, the position of your cursor, and if you're working, say, with particles, it tells you how many particles you have at the moment on screen and so on. So we'll be referring back to the info panel quite a lot. To the right is the audio panel. Underneath that is your preview panel. We'll be using this preview panel to watch our compositions back and to navigate in time. Underneath it is our effects and presets. All of the available effects in After Effects will be listed inside of here. And these are all categorized into folders. Say for example you want to blur a layer, you'll have the blur and sharpen folder here. You can twirl this down and you see all the available effects to do with blur and sharpen. You can twirl this back up. These triangles here are called twirlies in After Effects. Whenever you see them, you can click on them and that will twirl down to open up its contents. Then once you're done with this, you can click back on this and it will collapse again to save you some space. At the top of this effects and presets panel is the search area. This is really useful. After a while, you'll know the names of most of the effects that you'll be using in After Effects, so you can simply type in the name. That saves you from finding it inside of this list. So you can simply say, for example, click on this search area and type in lens, and it will filter all the effects and show you only the effects that include the word lens in them. Okay, so this is really useful. I'm going to click on this X mark to go back to the first state. Underneath the effects and presets area is your timeline and your layers panel. At the moment our timeline is empty because we don't have a composition open at the moment, and on the left hand side you'll see all the layers that create your composition. Again, at the moment we don't have any. This is the standard workspace that After Effects gives you. You don't have to stick with this, however. Say for example you want to see a bit more of your project panel and a bit less of your composition panel. After Effects lets you do that like many other Adobe applications. You can simply take your cursor in between those two panels and you see your cursor turns into a double-headed arrow. You can simply click when you see this icon and you can drag these left and right to rearrange the interface. And this works between all the other panels as well. So say for example you wanted to see a bit more of your info panel and a bit less of your preview panel. You can click in between those two and you can drag them down and you see you can make more space for the info panel. This even works between three panels. So you can take your cursor in between three panels and you see your cursor turns into a shape like this. You can then click here and you can move all of these left, right, up and down and they'll correspond. You can also reposition these panels. So what that means is you don't have to stick with the project panel being on the left hand side. If you wanted to, you can click on this little area next to the name project and drag this left, right, up and down, and you see these blue areas. These areas called drop zones. So say for example I want to have my project panel together with my composition panel. I can simply let go here when I see this blue area inside of my composition panel, and my project panel now gets docked together with my composition panel, which gives me tabs. Now I can click on the composition tab to open up my composition panel. Then I can click on my project tab to open up my project panel. If I wanted to put this back, say to the left side of the composition panel, I can simply click on this little area on the left hand side of the name and I can start dragging this, and if I let go on the left hand side this time of the composition panel and I see the drop zone here, my project panel goes to the left hand side of my composition panel. You can also turn any of these panels into a floating panel. What that means is that say for example you have a second screen and you want to put the project panel there on the second screen. Well, by default After Effects will not let you do that unless you use a keyboard modifier. I can click on the project panel and I can start dragging this around. And when I see those drop zones, I can hold down the Command key on the Mac or Control key on the Windows, and I'll see that the project panel turns into a floating window. Then I can let go of my mouse. Then here, the project panel is an independent window where I can click and drag this anywhere I like. I'm going to close this by clicking on this X mark on the top left. And don't worry if you lose any of these panels. You can't really lose them, you can only hide them. And if they ever disappear, you'll find all of those panels inside of the window menu here. So if I click on Window and go all the way down to Project, and if I click on this again, you see the project panel opens up again. If I want to dock this project panel, say to the left hand side of the composition panel again, I can simply click on the grabber here on the left hand side and drag it to the left hand side of the composition panel. Then there I have it. After a while, you'll find an interface that works best for you, and you'll probably want to save it. The way to save that is by going up to the workspace and clicking on where it says Standard, and go all the way down to New Workspace, and this will let you name that workspace. So let's name this My Workspace. Once I hit OK, this workspace gets saved as My Workspace, and I can go back to this anytime I want. You'll also see a list of different workspaces inside of this area. These are basically presets that Adobe thought would be useful if, say for example, you're working with effects. If you click on Effects workspace, it will simply shift things around and it will change the workspace to make it a little bit better and easier for working with effects. So if I click on, say for example, motion tracking, it will open up my tracker on the right hand side here, and it will also open up my layer panel and so on. Whenever you want, you can click on the workspace again and go all the way down and find your workspace, the one that you created, and it will open that up again. There's another really useful button there. If I say, for example, change the interface again to be, say, like this, and I messed everything up, and I want to go back to the default setting of my workspace that I just saved. Well, I can go up to Workspace and click on Reset My Workspace and hit Yes, and it will take it back to the first state that this was saved in.